Hi, I'm Mary, a librarian and book reviewer with a focus on stories written for kids, tweens, and teens. Today, I am joined by Fran Wilde, who's a two-time Nebula Award winner, and she has so far published 9 novels, a poetry collection, and over 70 short stories for adults, teens, and kids. Fran holds an MFA in poetry and an MA in information architecture and interaction design. She also reads too much and is a friend of the Oxford comma. Welcome, Fran. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I'd love to start by chatting a little bit about your newest book, your newest short story, your Star Stuff edition. Can you tell us a little
Sure.
bit about that collection?
Yes, well, I have it right here. Star Stuff is an anthology of short fiction that is created by my good friend Will Alexander and Wade Rausch. They gathered a number of short story fiction writers together and asked us to each write a story that was tethered in science, exploring one or more scientific principles. And I decided to go with quantum theories and ended up writing sort of an everything everywhere all at once for fifth graders. Do you want to hear if I can find it? It's gonna take me a minute, but I can read you the first sentence of the story, and that will give you pretty much. It's on page 208. It's called Red Right Returning, and it will give you a good idea of the problem of the story because that's the way I wrote it. Okay. Optimization T plus 30. Olivier sat outside Tallulah Station's fifth grade classroom, kicking her space unicorn Gravitron sneakers against the console of her piloting training pod and biting her lip. She was in so much trouble. Beside her floated 2 more training pods, which were exactly like hers in every detail, white ceramic, carbon, and 360 Clearview paneled shells that hugged a small command station and a single orange seat. In one pod's orange seat sat Ollie too, and another sat Ollie also. 30 minutes ago, there had been only one Ollie. Now there were three.
Oh, I love that. What is your background in science? Do you have an interest in it or more than that?
I do. I was the science writer for the Whiting School of Engineering at Johns Hopkins for a number of years, and I ended up doing a lot of science-based essays and informational articles for the academic community in and around Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Loyola College in specific. I wrote a lot for their alumni magazine and specifically translated science into narrative. That got me a long way from where I started, which was as a proofreader and junior editor to my relatives' scientific papers. They're all engineers, and I was the one in the family that could spell. So they tended to run it through me. It was a great way to get interested in the sciences in a hands-on way. I'm also a programmer, but not in the hard coding direction. I loved to program games and also very early database-driven websites that now would be recognizable only on the Wayback Machine.
Oh, that's so fascinating. What a great backstory that it's not just fiction for you, but it's translating the real world into a format that maybe is more recognizable for a lot of folks. That's so neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's valuable in that science is a story, right? There's always some sort of story of discovery, but also failure. And I love both. I love the balance of those. There is a really cool museum in Sweden called the Museum of Failure, and I think it's in Sweden, and I think it's called that. It just explores all the different iterations that science goes through in order to get to an answer, rather than just looking perfect for Instagram or social media. And that is one of my favorite things to talk about and write about.
Yeah, what a powerful concept that is often lost, I feel like, on especially people today that you want it to be perfect the first time you do it, but
And
that
it's so frustrating, right? When it's like, well, she got it, why can't I get it? And then you realize they didn't really. They just were showing you the A reel, the B reel wasn't there.
right. And you only learn by failing. So embracing that is really great.
Agreed, agreed.
So you've written stories for kids and for teens and for adults. Do you have a preferred age group that you write for?
That's really hard. I feel like the story sometimes defines its own age group and sometimes it exceeds it. I was a summer camp counselor for many, many years. I taught sailing mostly, but I also had, a cabin of girls every summer and my favorite age group then was actually 12 and 13-year-olds. I just loved that sort of the creativity and the interest in taking risks that just needed a spark to, say, okay, I'm going to go out and sail my own boat today. That'll be a good thing to do. I love that. But I write for um, curious brains, and it just kind of depends on which story I want to tell when. So sometimes my favorite area is middle grade. I love middle grade. One of the things that I experienced early in my writing career when I wrote Updraft was that initially it was written as a Bildungsroman, and it still is. It's, character is finding her way in the world as on her own for the first time, which is really a YA concept. But it also had these huge political and overarching, epic fantasy notes to it as well. And so I thought, well, I'll just write it and let my editor figure it out when I get an editor, because it was my first book and I still was, submitting it and hoping. And then when it was bought, we decided to position it as a crossover, both a absolutely suitable for teens to read and also good for adults. I grew up reading Anne McCaffrey like that, not probably not unfamiliar to the Dragon Drum series and the Kilishandra Ree stories, which is absolutely YA. I mean, that is so YA now that you look at it. There's a makeover, there's all these other things. Um, but I love that era and I love that sense that sort of on the edge of possibility that you can write towards. But it turned out that that book hit notes for lots of different age groups of readers. And I kind of let the publisher and the marketing and the librarians especially be the guide to where they wanted to shelve it. And I'm really glad I did actually that because you guys know your audience, especially locally. So that sort of has happened with a lot of my books. Some of them sometimes wind up being handed to specific readers, and sometimes they are absolutely like, here, this belongs here. I know where that is, and that's fine.
Yeah. So you mentioned crossovers, things that are suitable to both YA and adults. Tell me a little bit more about that and what draws you to that segment of literature.
I think I've always read there. I grew up. I joke that I was raised by a library and a bookstore, an independent bookstore. The Tredyffrin Easttown Library in just outside of Philadelphia, and a bookstore that is no longer there, but another bookstore replaced it. Originally, it was uh, oh my gosh, I can't even the Readers Forum, and now it is Main Point Books, which I'm going to on my tour, which is very exciting. Um, the they let me wander the stacks. They let me sort of be the guide in choosing what I wanted to read when. I was that kid that would just blow through all of the contests in the summer and, come out with a stack of books that I carried home every week. And my parents were on board. And so it was sort of, yes, let's move these up high where you can't reach them, but the rest go for it. And I kind of found myself writing to that sense of things as well. Just the story takes lead and the readers will follow. with Updraft specifically, if people had, and this is dating myself, but Updraft came out in 2015, which was 10 years ago. People would ask me, what's the age appropriate nature of this? And I said, if they have read or seen The Hunger Games, this is fine. There's nothing in there that levels above that. And that's kind of true for more of my books. I even in the more adult books, it's always kind of fade to black and off-screen stuff, and I have a hard time writing writing stuff that is hard to read. So
Yeah. Well, that is nice, especially for parents that are looking for books for their readers who are voracious and then also being worried about what the content might be inside the story. I think a lot about Star Wars is similar to that, where things happen just off screen, just,
it's
and you
it's
know that
funny
it's
that
going
you
on.
mentioned that because I also write for Star Wars. So this is but yeah, Star Wars is absolutely off screen. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was
No, no, no,
enthusiastic.
no. It's okay. Yeah, no, but I think that that helps a lot of parents find books for their kids, the ones who they can't find enough books and they're worried about all of that content. So, having content that is approachable for that readership is really, really good.
Yeah, I try. I do occasionally write some things that are much more on the adult side in my mind, but that's because they're more horror driven and I never thought I was writing horror until somebody said yes, yes, you also write horror. So, but it turns out with things like John Klassen's The Skull and some other like really is it's John Klassen, right? I'm not guessing that like horror kids love horror, kids love scary stuff too, and so I guess I was feeling bad about that and I'm not going to.
No, it's a big topic right now with librarians about how middle grade in particular love reading horror because it's safe. It's kind of like going on a roller coaster where, it's scary and you're going to walk off the other side. And it helps them explore those harder subjects in a really safe space. Um, yeah, so you're right on board with that.
Oh, good.
So you write kind of all over. So with short stories, longer stories, where do your ideas come from? And do you have a preference of if you write longer or shorter stories?
My ideas come from I keep a lot of working journals that I'm happy to pull one out, but I have um my brain has a bad habit of really loving to throw ideas at me while I'm working on deadlines. So I will just put those ideas in a journal. And then when I'm finished the deadline and my brain is a smooth platter of nothingness, then I can go and look and see what else I wanted to work on so badly in the middle of this other book. So a lot of that, I gather ideas as I'm out walking, or if I'm out doing something, I always keep something to write with on me. Usually it's a notebook and a pen, but also my phone is a really good platform for writing on. I'll email myself ideas all the time, just overheard snippets of conversations, not being like super nosy or invasive of other people's boundaries, but just if somebody says something that just catches my ear a little bit and I want to play it out, I'll write it down. And then I go to a lot of libraries and I go to a lot of museums and I just kind of browse. I will follow a path through, a museum that I've been to many, many times. I'll try and take a different path and see what I notice. And sometimes that will also become a story.
Cool. What does your writing process look like? Do you have a specific schedule that you follow, or is it kind of more here and there depending on your schedule availability?
Right now it's very here and there. And when I'm teaching, it's very here and there because it gets, I want to prioritize my students. And sometimes that means I'm setting aside my own work. But what I've noticed is that when I am writing on deadline. What I should be doing all the time is if I get up and write first thing, even if it's just for half an hour, then it's easier to get back into during the day. I tend to write 1,500 words to 2,000 words, or maybe two or three scenes a day, and then I will stop and I'll write down some questions. And if I put the questions by my bed, it sort of lets my subconscious work on them overnight. So that's most of it. I also um, find that when I have gotten off of my writing practice, when I am sort of out of pattern with what really works for me, going back to my notebooks and looking at, how I set up a working day and revisiting that is something that's really valuable to me. So I'm pretty notebook driven in all of my processes and practices.
Yeah, well, if it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah.
How long does it typically take for you to finish a story? I know that with different lengths that can vary, but
Yeah, different links. I love writing flash and poetry because it's good to jot the ideas down. It's a small space to play with language, so that's maybe I'll work on one of those in a day. I use those as palette cleansers in between longer projects as well. For oh gosh, for novels. The first draft usually takes anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on the length of the book. And I do most of my first pass of research before I start writing the book. I set myself a note in my calendar that says research time ends today. And then I have like 2, 3 weeks to just fill my mind with everything I can find. And if I want to take a deep dive down a rabbit hole, I'll follow, all the facts there. I got really swept up in the history of man-made wings when I was writing Updraft. I ended up writing an article for the Library of Congress on the topic because it's such a wild sort of, over history, many people just decided I want to try flying, and then they make some wings and find a 200 to 250 feet tall thing, and it wouldn't work because they didn't know and they hadn't looked up the history of it, so they didn't. It's reading is important because it tells you what not to do repeatedly. So when the first set of man-made wings actually worked, it worked because the person who had designed it so that your feet were picked up in the back like a hang glider. And it was fascinating to me that that was the mechanic. So I got lost in that for a little while, but then my timer on my calendar went off and I had to go write. And so what will happen is I write with a lot of brackets. And if you've got any young writers out there, brackets are magic because you can write a whole story. You can write all the things that you know you want to put in. And then when you hit a point where you don't know something, you just put in the brackets as specifically as possible so that future you doesn't go, what was I thinking then? Um, you put in the brackets what you want, and then you keep going with the story. So I would be writing along and I would say, and she wore a shirt made out of, and I wouldn't know. So I would write whatever the shirt is made out of, fabric, question mark, metal, question mark, and then I would go on so that the flow of writing keeps happening and I don't get diverted. And then at the end of when I've finished the draft, I can go back and gather up all of those brackets. And that's my second pass of research is I'll find everything and figure out what the brackets are, figure out if I really need this detail, and then I'll go again. And I do a lot of revision passes. So at the end of the day, when I'm ready to turn in a draft, it's usually 6 to 9 months.
okay. That's actually on the shorter side of things, I feel like, depending or based on several of the other authors that I've talked to, it depends on a lot of factors, but 6 to 9 months is a pretty good amount of time. That's nice.
Yes, yeah. It does depend on, everything, family, the world. I would love to um I like to plan things out so that stress is not my office companion.
That makes sense, especially with so many other things going on and teaching and
Yeah.
deadlines and all of that.
Yes.
What is it that you hope that readers come away with when they interact with your books?
Again, really good question. And I want to say hope, but I think it's more that um, one of the things that I really value in my characters, whether they are complicated characters or it's a short story and they have to be, is competence. Like they know something really well and they know how to do it. And they don't necessarily flaunt that, they just do it. And that makes a character interesting to me. And watching how they operate that competence in a setting is really interesting to me as well. Um, so I think for your readers, allowing yourself to be good at something and celebrating that and just doing it is so important because sometimes we're taught, you should be quiet if you're good at something. And no, be competent, be confident in your competence. That's a good thing.
And it's nice to have role models in books that you can look at to see how they're doing that and then maybe emulating them in some ways as well.
Yes, yes.
Do you have a favorite character or favorite story that you've written?
Usually, my favorite character is in the story that I have recently written or just written because I can still hear their voice. Because one of the things that is really important to me when I start a story is that I need to be able to hear some of the characters' voices, maybe not all of them, but especially if they're arguing with each other over something, then I can tell the difference between them and they really start to stand out as individuals rather than just pieces that I'm moving around on a board. So their voices get caught in my head a lot. And right now, definitely Ollie's voice from Star Stuff is a big one because I liked writing Ollie and all of the iterations of Ollie so much. Um, I am um, very immersed in there are three main characters in my book that's coming out on Monday, which is older teen to adult book. There is a marriage plot in here and a lot of um, bad behavior around stealing things. So just as a heads up, but a philosophy of thieves. The main character is Rusa. That's Rusa jumping out a window. Don't do that. She's a thief and she doesn't want to necessarily be a thief anymore, but her entire family is thieves. Not in the typical way that we would understand thieving and burglary and things. They are entertainment thieves. Because the wealthy in Rusa's world have hire people who are less wealthy, often very poor, to come and rob their houses and during parties. And one of the entertainments that they offer their guests is the ability to chase the thieves and try and catch them. And so Rusa's job is to outwit all of these guests at all of these parties. It's kind of a cross between Oliver Twist and Cinderella in that way, except there are several different heists going on. And she is a main character, and her brother Daxian is a main character, and they fight often, which, as I mentioned before, helps me hear those voices. And I like them. They're not at all perfect people. And I like that as well.
Yeah, what an intriguing idea about how people entertain themselves and
Yeah.
lean on others in order to do that. I'm really curious to check it out. Wow.
This is economic class struggles are something that often comes into my work. There's even hints of that in Updraft, although it's definitely in the background.
What advice would you give to young writers who might be embarking on their journey for the first time?
Don't be afraid to write the wrong thing. That's the best advice I can say. I mean, research is wonderful, definitely do it, but then put your own words down on the page and say, you know what, this is a first draft. I can come back and revise it and refine it. Writing is a craft. It is it is the work that you do to engage with somebody else beyond yourself. And it's not just about putting a product into the world. It's not just about having a book or a number of books. It's about that moment where you have words that you have written in a book that somebody else picks up and connects with that you might not even know.
Can I ask you how long it took you to get published for the first time? How many things did you write that didn't make it to the finished product?
In different stages, a long time. I published my first poems. My first poems were published in when I was still in my 20s. And then I didn't publish much for a very long time. I was working, I was starting a family, and then I wrote some short stories and sent them out, and they came back, and wrote some more and I sent those out. And after a couple of years, I started getting notes from the editor that said, "This is good, but not quite good enough. Keep trying." And then I sent some more out. Short stories, especially, are great places to test ideas out and to try different things. And so when I got my first acceptance for my first short story, it was definitely a test. I don't know that I would write that story now, but it got accepted and I felt so great. And I think I got paid $100 for it. It was from Nature Magazine, which is the science magazine. It was a 975 word short story, flash story called Without. And I was so excited just that somebody else thought my story was worth sharing, publishing, putting out there. And then it was another long stretch of time before I sold anything else. And I just kept trying. When I sent my first novel out, we were on submission for several months and it was just tough. But submitting short stories and querying your work is really good practice for being a writer because a lot of it is about sending things out and having them come back.
Would you say that that's one of the most important lessons that you've learned so far in this process is that need to be tenacious and patient?
Definitely, definitely. And to keep trying. It's hard. It's hard when people say no. It's hard when people say, this is not for me. Because of course it is. It's you wrote it. You want it to be for them. But your audience is out there. It's just a matter of right desk, right time, right story.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true to life also. So many things work that way. Um, Fran, let's see. So you have a book coming out Monday. Do you have other projects in the works that you are comfortable talking about?
I do. I have a second book in the Philosophy of Thieves series that I'm working on. I have been working with the Star Wars universe, and I am currently writing book three of a trilogy that kind of follows along the same timeline. That leads, not the same timeline, but it follows along in the Star Wars universe, leading up to A New Hope, which is the going to be coming up on its 50th anniversary in 2 years. And that's when my part of the trilogy is supposed to come out. So I'm really excited about that. But lots of hard work going into that for those students who are writers. I just turned in an outline that was 18,000 words long, and that's not even close to the finish line on this. We just work really hard.
18,000 words, and that's not even and now you get to go flesh it out a little bit.
Yes. Yep. Actually, that's what I'm doing this afternoon.
I've asked you a lot of questions today, Fran, but what is the question that I did not ask you that you wish I had?
Ah, well. I am also an editor of a short fiction magazine, which I don't know that you knew, but it's short fiction for adults. It's called the Sunday Morning Transport, and we um, publish one story a week from different speculative writers. And something that I have been asked a lot by other writers is, how do you decide which stories to publish? And because we've talked a little bit about submitting work and how that can be frustrating, but the other side of it is I am creating a magazine that is a whole world unto itself, and I want it to be strong and powerful and have unique stories in it. So sometimes I think that a really good question to ask an editor is, how do you select the stories that you would publish? And for me, it's the stories that just absolutely wow me, and I'm still thinking about them the next day, which is really hard to predict. So the best thing to do is to write what blows your socks off, what you really are excited about. Um, but also understand that if we get, 16 stories about bees, we got five our first year. We can't publish all of them. So even though it's a really excellent blows your socks off story about bees, we might only publish three of those. And you should take your excellent bee story and send it out again.
Find that right desk, right person, right story, right time.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, that's so fun. And what a great way to hone your own skills also as you're going through all of these submissions and seeing the things that you like and the things that resonate with you.
True, it's true. It's I one of my first internships in the science fiction world was as a submissions reader for another magazine, and I read about 200 stories a week, if you can believe it or not, that were came in from all over the place, and we had to decide if we were which stories we were going to pass up to the editors from there, and that also was a great learning experience. Just working for a magazine and figuring out what resonates with you and what might resonate with your readers or your editors is really valuable.
Yeah. Oh, what a cool project. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you. Where can folks go to find out more about you and your books?
You can find me on my website at Fran, Wild, WILDE.net. I'm also on Instagram and Blue Sky, and I will be out at various bookstores and libraries, hopefully, and near you come October.
Great. Is that schedule up on your website also?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Fran, thank you so much for taking some time with me today. Listeners, if any of Fran's books sound like great fits for you, I hope you look for them wherever you get your books. And Fran, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Mary, thank you so much again. This was a wonderful conversation.